To pin us to the front. So I don't know how to make it so that this is the when they sound a big screen. Hold on. You may see the rabbi. Let's go. Let's record. It's popular. Smart. It's not long videos on. It's recording.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for fulfilling this tremendous mitzvah of Halabayas HaMeis, escorting those who have passed to their next stage. This is a tremendous mitzvah, and even though it comes with inconveniences, of course, traveling and coming during the day, Hashem HaKadosh Baruch Hu rewards all those that escort the soul to his resting place. Reb Osher ben Yaakov Yehuda. So we're here today to pay respects to his neshama. Ashrei Simimei Dorech Ha'hiltem Miseres Adinoi Ashrei Noitzi Eidoisam B'Chalevi D'Rishu After Fadu Avlam B'Dracham Alachu Atos Yibisav Chodach L'Shem Yoi Achalai Yikoinu D'Racha D'Shmur Fukecham Oz Le'Evei B'Avitel Gum Zeisabach Oid Chab Yashaleva B'Lavnish L'Zitkecham Fukecham Eshmar D'Azinyan B'Yoi. I had a brief opportunity over the years to get to know Arthur. He became a little bit of a pen pal for a while. I was an easy place for him to complain. And I enjoyed it because I'm also a complainer. And I understood him and he understood me. And he would always voice from different places. I would get beautiful emails and I would respond, etc., etc. But I think that what's very important today, before the children come up to speak and say a few words, is that we're starting the Torah all over again. And everything in Torah is so profound, with so many levels of messages that are overt and subtle. The first creation in the world, says the Torah by Yehi Or, is that God created light. And that tells you the purpose of creation. The purpose of creation is for every human being to create light, which means the world is dark. And the darkness of the world, many people get affected by the darkness of the world. And sometimes we're part of the problem for a while. But the mission of life is by Yehi Or, to be light to the world. Some people feel that much more than others, that they feel the need and the responsibility. Some feel the darkness of the world. They see the darkness of the world and they fight that darkness all the time. But this is the mission that the soul feels by Yehi Or. Arthur saw the world. He was able to detect things that were not right. And he felt the need and the responsibility to try to affect them and to try to change them to the best of his ability. But one of the things that he did very well, Baruch Hashem, is we look closely in the Torah, we see the first thing the Torah tells us, the first command to mankind is Pru'urvu, Mishpachim, family. That's the first way you could affect the world. Which means there are people in the world who know how to fix global warming, but they can't fix their car. They know how to fix many other things in life, but the things around them are very difficult to fix. Very difficult to create around you. At a distance, it's very easy to create. We can solve the world's problems. But our own individual problems around us is very difficult. Not everyone is willing to take up on it. Baruch Hashem, Arthur and Julia, blessed to have a beautiful family. But not only a beautiful family, but a family that Arthur can go upstairs to Shemayim and say, Ru'u Gidulum Shegidal. Look at my kiddush. Look at my family. Look, Hashem, I left the world right when I came into the world. And that's a tremendous, and that's why the Torah says the first commandment is beautiful. Now, some people have to multiply spiritually, but the first mitzvah is to multiply physically, and those physical children are usually the first place and the easiest place to influence. It's hard to influence somebody else who's not your child and not your relative. But your own child, they're living with you, and that Arthur put tremendous effort and energy for his kidulach and his children. He lived and died by it. I know I spoke to him many times about the education system and many other things, and he felt it's so important that he didn't have to be Yidden. And Baruch Hashem, with Kindalach, Ariella, Abram, Abba, and all the beautiful grandchildren, Meital, Deborah, Barav, Sophia, Amaya, Nahon, Efrat, Orly, Edan, and his sister Brenda. But Baruch Hashem, a mishpacha that feels Yiddishkeit is truly a blessing. When he comes to Shemayim, I guarantee you, all he has to show is his Vahi or and Puravu. I brought Kindalach into the world, and they're going to carry on the mission of Hashem. Please come up, say a few words. The Kindalach, the children, they tell, please come say a few words.
Hi, everyone. My sisters, Efrat and Orly, could not be here today. One has a newborn, one is very pregnant. Good reasons, but I'm going to represent them as well. And I would like to start by sharing some memories that I have, and I'll also share some of their memories that they listed out for me. I think my first distinct memory of my Zadie is 4 years old, and it's kind of late at night. I'm in pajamas already, and he comes on a Wednesday night and he brings me a Hershey's bar. And this was a regular occurrence, and I think that everyone who knew him well would know that that's in character. And I remember it happening throughout the time that we continued to live in Teaneck, and then we made Aliyah when I was 7 years old. So obviously the weekly trips weren't feasible. But that's a very fond memory. And we have all so many of these memories of these little things that we used to do with Zadie that were just so special and fun. Me and my sisters all have a very strong memory of him giving brachas on Shabbos. Everyone who, all of my cousins and uncles and aunts all know that Zadie was very into that, and we all remember his big, strong hands, and he always smelled like peppermint. And he would also give brachas before a trip, which I don't know anyone else who has that tradition. My dad obviously does, but that was special. He also had a few stories that he told us of being in the airport and giving someone a bracha, and then a random person comes and asks for a blessing. And after we made Aliyah, then we would see Zadie once in a while. And but the main relationship was we would come for summers, and we have memories of doing all sorts of fun things with Grandma and Zadie at the summer. They would take us to plays. Efrat remembers that there was one Shabbos and she was over and she said that she never saw The Lion King on Broadway and she really would like to, and Zadie got her tickets like within a week, and he took her there. And we remember Zadie would make his famous iced tea and the shawl that he was so proud of. And we had very fond memories of that. And another way that our relationship continued throughout the year, when we were separated by thousands of miles between us, was phone calls and emails. And Zadie would he would call me once every few weeks. It would usually be a long phone call. We'd talk about everything and anything. And Zadie would also write emails. He wrote emails to the whole family. He wrote emails privately, and that was another way that we had this strong relationship. And I remember in high school, whenever I would talk to Zadie on the phone, I think it was a little more frequent because like my dad would put him on the phone. I was still at my parents' house. And every time I spoke on the phone, he would ask me, tell me some Torah that you learned today.
Mm.
Admittedly, I did not always have something to say. That's a little bit of a tall ask for a high school student to remember every single day a new Kiddush. But it was such an important aspect of life and like for Zadie, it was so important that we were getting this good Torah education in Israel, and that was definitely significant. I remember the last conversation I had with Zadie was a few months ago, and Zadie wasn't like 100% at that point, and said to me, "I have a dream. It's specifically for you and Natano, my husband. We're both engineers. It's relevant." He said, "My dream is for you to create." And to me, that, like, remembering that, it connects me actually to the Parsha that we just read, Bereshit. And I'll share a little bit of something that I said in shul this week, which I think Zadie would be very proud to know that I spoke in shul this week. So Bereshit Rabbah says that one of the reasons why the Torah starts with the story of the creation of the world is because the first thing Hashem does in the Torah is create. And one thing that makes human beings unique from animals and unique from angels, and it's the thing, one of the things that we share with Hashem is our capacity to create. And that speaks to me very strongly. And I think that also connects a little bit to all of us and also to who Zadie was. He had this creative side. He was a writer, he was a music producer at some points. And something else that connects to this is when I went to Poland in 12th grade, I remember Zadie wrote me a long email about this. He wrote to me about, I was gonna go visit Auschwitz, and he wrote to me about the family members of his that he never met, but that were killed there. About his aunts and his uncles, his cousins. And there was a feeling, anybody who discussed this thing with him, there was a feeling that he was haunted by this place that he never visited. And when I got that email and I went to there in person, and I felt this sort of thread of history running through me and connecting me to Zadie and connecting me to that, to those relatives from Hungary that none of us got to meet. And I think that there was a little bit of Zadie had this regret of not having all of these cousins and uncles. But one of the most significant things that Zadie did create in his life was that his children and his grandchildren have that thing that he didn't really get to have. And I also just want to add that it's a huge plus that my children also got to meet Zadie. They got to bounce on his knee and do horsey. And that's a big plus for me and for them and for Zadie and thank you. Hi, I'm Amaya. I'm a Hopper's daughter. Um,
To know Arthur Aaron, my Zadie, is to also know the sport basketball. It was more than just a game to him. When talking to Zadie about basketball, you weren't just talking about a sport, you were talking about a piece of his heart. Zadie, beloved husband, father, grandfather, great grandfather, friend, Eved Hashem, role model, and the title I would like to focus on is coach. If you want to be good at something, you have to work hard at it. That's how life works, and Zadie was an embodiment of this truth. While I had always been close with Zadie, when I made the varsity basketball team in ninth grade, we began speaking very frequently. We would train when he visited, work on drills over the phone, email back and forth, talk about my games, the NBA, anything and everything basketball. Through those conversations, Zadie taught me so much more than just how to play. He taught me how to work hard for what I want, not give up when things get tough, to speak up for myself, and to be the kind of teammate who lifts others up. At the time, I thought he was just teaching me about how to be better at basketball. But now, as I realize and reflect, he was teaching me how to be better at life. He was shaping the person I am and the person I hope to keep becoming. Zadie showed me and everyone what it really means to love and to be passionate. He was one of the most passionate people I know. From basketball to music to family and coffee ice cream, Zadie taught me that when you really love something, you spend time with it, you focus on it, and you water and nourish your love so they can grow. Just like he did, I'm going to speak up for what's right, to reach out when people fall, to take a second and slow down, read the court, and make the right decisions. To give my all, because that's how my grandfather lived. That's how I hope to live too. In every shot I take, every goal I chase, and in every bit of love I give, I will remember you and make you proud.
Beautiful.
Hi, I'm Deborah, Dave's granddaughter. Thank you all for coming. I just want to thank Grandma taking such good care of Zadie for the last 50-something years, really, but especially the last year. I know it was not easy and the emotional toll was great. On behalf of all your grandchildren, thank you. So I want to thank Crystal, Zadie's caretaker, who was such a light for Zadie and our whole family the last couple of months. And lastly, thank you, Hashem, for giving me the gift of Zadie for 26 years. Zadie was my best friend. I was named after his mother, Esther, and that was the start of our bond. When I was 4, it was my birthday, and as we all know, Zadie loved golf. And I, being 4, wanted him to know that I was more important than golf. Henry's now famous words for one said, 4, no golf. Zadie loved that story. I remember when Zadie started calling our house every couple of days, wanting to talk to each of us. At first, I thought it was weird, but pretty quickly I fell into the routine and started telling Zadie everything. When I was a kid, that entailed me telling him how much I hated reading, and him telling me, "You won't always feel that way." He was right. I have this vivid memory of yelling upstairs to Ezra saying, "Zadie's on the phone and wants to talk to you." That kind of thing happens a lot. Over the years, as a child, we would talk 2 to 3 times a week about everything and anything. And eventually it became every single night. Zadie, being a night owl, would often go to bed at 2 or 3 a.m., so the time difference worked out. I was in LA. Sometimes the only thing that would get us off call was all the telling he needed to say. One day, I decided that we needed to try FaceTime. So over the phone, I walked Zadie through how to use FaceTime on his iPad. Pretty impressive that he could follow my instructions. But that was Zadie, always trying things to stay in touch with his grandchildren. Just like the Weekly Gazette, the nightly calls became nightly FaceTimes for years. It was such a big part of my life. Many of my friends got to know Zadie, and occasionally some would join our FaceTime. He had a genuine interest in all of them. Sometimes I would wake up to emails from Zadie after one of our nightly FaceTimes, him reflecting on the conversation. It was usually him giving me encouragement about something or sharing something he thought I would appreciate. I always save those emails to look back on. When I lived in New York, it was Zadie who I spoke to every single night for a minimum of an hour. Most people's first choice when you can talk to their grandfather every night, but it was my first choice and I truly loved it. I had so much fun with him. We would often add Kayla, my best friend, to the calls and crack up for hours. Watching Zadie really laugh hard was one of my favorite things. We would talk about everything, politics, pop culture, whatever was on either of our minds. He loved to throw in his jokes too. Who could forget about the Pope and the lousy haircut? He was the first person I went to for advice when I needed to complain, when I needed support, when I needed a laugh. I just needed someone to listen. When Ziggy couldn't help me, he would say, "You should talk to Grandma. She's really smart." Ziggy always stayed relevant with what was going on, even once asking, "What's with this Cardi B and the horse?" Of course, he was talking about the latest Cardi B song featuring Megan Thee Stallion. I don't know any other 80-plus-year-old that was as up to date as Ziggy. It was the best. When I first started dating my husband, Pinchas, Ziggy was the person I spoke to about him. I would tell him all my fears and worries. Often at the end of a phone call, I would come to the conclusion, okay, I think I'm gonna break up with him on our next date. I would call Zadie after the date and he would expect this whole breakup conversation. But of course, I decided, oh, maybe one more date. At some point, Zadie started to joke with me. So are you breaking up today? Of course I didn't. And Zadie was the first person I introduced to Pinchas. And from that 10-minute FaceTime call, Zadie knew. He knew Pinchas was the real deal. He even nicknamed him a Husenbucher. There were many nights I would cry to Zadie, and he would cry with me or cry later and send me an email. He cared so deeply and was so invested in me. Zadie was my biggest cheerleader, believed I could do anything I wanted, way more than I believed in myself. It was through Zadie's constant encouragement and love that I felt like I could really do life. One of his rules for life that he would tell me is try to have a good time and go one day at a time. When I got engaged, one of the first FaceTimes was to Zadie and Grandma. I cried because we both knew how much it took for me to get to that place and the role Zadie played in getting me there. I was lucky enough to have Zadie at my wedding, to get a bracha from him under the B'teken, at the B'teken. It was incredibly emotional and a memory I will cherish forever. But Zadie was extra memorable because a server bumped into him and brought his jacket full of different sauces, which Zadie never let me forget about when we talked about my wedding. I'm so grateful Zadie took Pinchas in as his own. Pinchas too started getting FaceTimes, emails, and texts. And sometimes I would walk into a room and hear them on their own FaceTime call. It was so heartwarming. It was always a dream of mine to bring my future husband to Sarasota to hang out with Grandma and Zadie. In our first year of marriage, Pinchas and I did just that. It was such a special trip. Even when we were far away in Israel, Pinchas would FaceTime Zadie and show him his latest dinner extravaganza. Zadie loved those calls. He was very into food. When I got married, Zadie and I didn't talk every night anymore, but at least once or twice a week. I would tell him I felt bad, and he would say, "Don't, that's the way life is supposed to be." He was so happy for me and just wanted me to be happy. The last couple of months, I wasn't able to talk to Zadie as much as I would have liked. He was in and out of rehab, didn't have much access to his iPad, and I was in Israel. So when I came back to the States, at my first chance, I went to visit him. That was a hard trip for me. Zadie wasn't the same. But one night I came downstairs to check on him, was wide awake and lucid, so we stayed up all night just like old times. I brought him coffee ice cream, we FaceTimed Kayla again, and just talked. I got my Zadie back for a night. I'm so grateful I had that experience. I could go on and on about Zadie. How kind, thoughtful, sincere, hilarious, honest, and amazing he was. But we would be here until Shabbat, so I'll end with this. Zadie, you just love me so much, and I love you so much. Our relationship was so uncomplicated and full of unconditional love. I could tell you everything, and you were so accepting of me. You were my person, I'll miss you forever, and I'll keep you in my heart always. I love you much, Zayla. I'll always be your smarty princess.
I'm Amanda, and I'm my father's daughter. Thank you all for coming. Before I begin, on behalf of myself and our entire family, particularly my siblings, I want to thank my mother, Julia Aaron, for taking such beautiful care of my father for the past 58 years, especially these last difficult years and months. My strongest first memory of my father is around 3 or 4 years old. We lived on a cul-de-sac on Hanover Street in Teaneck. One night, my father was standing outside smoking a pipe with a friend. It was the 70s. I knew my mother didn't like the smell, and I said, "You need to stop. Mommy doesn't like it." He laughed and told me it was okay. That's when I knew my father was his own person, did his own thing. Funnily enough, that was my father's exact first impression of me. I was born in 1975, so I was the first baby that my father was present for in the delivery room. In a story he relished telling, I came out, they put me on my mother, and he leaned over to look at me. I promptly stuck out my tongue. First impressions, friends, they don't lie. Other strong childhood memories of my father include driving in his car to the Teaneck Swim Club, back and forth, and listening to Stevie Winwood's album Higher Love. I can see the sunlight pouring through the open car windows and feel the wind going through my wet hair, the songs on our car radio, both of us singing along. My father and I both loved music. He was a record producer when he was younger, producing a gold record, jingles, and later even wrote a book about the Beatles. When I was a teenager, he owned a network of radio stations and health clubs. As a senior in high school, I wrote commercials for him for the local businesses that he advertised. You could say he gave me my first shot. My father was always moving quickly, hustling. I remember him coming in from the garage saying, "I need to shave. I need to go to the JCC to swim." Always writing in his book of appointments, just moving quickly. He made work look like fun. He once took me on a sales appointment when I was 5, and I watched him convince other people to do what he wanted them to do. I remember thinking, I want to do that too. As a youngest child, being in control was always my primary goal. Hard work and trying your best were exemplified by both of my parents. But my father had other expectations that were very clear to me. You had to be smart, beautiful, and religious, and not necessarily in that order. Expectation number 1, smart. When I was in 10th grade, I took the PSATs and I didn't study because my English teacher told us it was a benchmark test. I was walking upstairs after receiving my scores. My father called me into his room. He was taking off his watch. I remember this very vividly. And he said to me, "Ahava, I saw your scores on the PSAT. What are you going to do? Your brother and sister are a lot smarter than you." If you want to know why I'm on a crusade for world domination, this may be the moment in blossom. My father claimed this story never happened, but my mother is witness to another story about my father's assessment of my smarts. We were driving somewhere together. I don't remember where. I was in the back seat. I was already an adult leading my own business, and I was talking about a challenge I was having. And my father commented, "Ahava, I think you're smarter than most men I know." So on the smart scale, I ended up somewhere smarter than most men, but not Abram, and certainly not Ariella. Expectation number 2, beautiful. The looks were incredibly important to my father, the Hungarian that he was. He was always dressed sharply with a tie and coordinating pocket square. He wore dress hats when he went on sales calls, making him even taller than his intimidating 6'3" height. When he would visit, I would come downstairs ready for shul wearing my own hat. And as an expert, he would say to me, "Tilt it, tilt your hat."
As a pudgier kid, my parents were always after me to lose weight. It was a different time. After I had Narbonne, I lost a substantial amount of weight, and my father saw me for the first time in a few months. He was really struck by the transformation. After watching me for a few minutes, he said to me, "You know, I really think you were better looking when you were heavier." Strike two. Expectation number 3, being religious. Not only an expectation, but a value, being religious to my father was the ultimate goal. We have a piece of artwork in the dining room showing circles that are linked. He would often look at it and say, "Ahava, it's the only thing you have to do, link up to the chain." Jewish survival and continuity were constantly on his mind. You can't really talk about my father without acknowledging the devastating effects of the Holocaust. His mother lost 4 siblings and her parents in Auschwitz, and his father also lost members of his family in 5. Right, 5, yeah. My father talked about being a little boy and having the survivors come and sleep on the floor of his parents' apartment with numbers on their arms. He had a tremendous hatred for anyone who hated Jews. In a story that's probably more my sister's to tell, but I borrowed everything from her anyway. When she was a young teenager, she ordered multicolored paper clips from a catalog. Now you can find these types of things everywhere, but back then they were really special. They came in a small lucite box that had a tiny gold oval sticker on the bottom that said, "Made in Germany." After he saw that, he made her throw them away. That's how much the deep trauma of Europe affected him. My father was a devotee of saying Tehillim in his later years. He would say 2 chapters for each person on his list. And he said Tehillim for many people. He was always saying to me, "I need to finish my Tehillim. I need to finish my Tehillim." When I would tell him of a sick friend, he would add their name to his list and always ask me how they were doing. He took his job of protecting his family through prayer very seriously. But the most impactful things he said to me weren't necessarily about Judaism, but about God, for whom he had tremendous faith. When I was dating, which is a challenging time for most people, but especially for me, I was sitting at the kitchen table one day crying, and he sat across from me, held my hand, and said, "Ahava, this is God's business." I had a lot of anxiety about Aha Media Group when it first started, and I remember expressing my concerns to him in one conversation. He said to me, "Ahava, you're only going to have what God wants you to have." In that moment, my entire perspective changed, and it gives me comfort to this day. One expectation my father didn't have was fun. He liked to have a good time, to laugh and tell jokes, but I don't think fun was a goal or an expectation. It was a byproduct of spending time with the people that he loved. But I wasn't having fun and often would tease him and play practical jokes on him. My father had OCD tendencies and wanted everything lined up on his desk in a certain way. When I would visit him in Sarasota, he would sit in his big chair in his office and watch TV, and I would often move things around on his desk to bother him. He would swat my hand away and say, "Stop that, you turkey." I was once asking my mother about a valuable china plate she had on display in her break front, and she said to me, "Take it now, I don't need it." My father heard and said, "Absolutely not, leave it there. I'll notice if you take it." So when he wasn't looking, I replaced the china plate on display with a fancy paper plate. Later that week, after we left, I asked my mom if he noticed. She said he sure did the next day, and he laughed. On another occasion, I switched some of the paintings in the living room, claiming he would never notice. He called me a week later after he had eye surgery and said, "I would have noticed sooner if I could see." My father loved, but was also nervous about my sense of adventure. He always wanted to know where I was traveling to and what I was eating and if I was safe. That was his favorite goodbye, "Be safe." I took him to Hungary and Romania to see his parents' birthplaces and his grandfather's grave. He was very affected by that moment and that trip, and I know he appreciated that I wanted to celebrate that sense of adventure with him and share with him that part of his past. When my Swiftie obsession began, my father complained all of her music sounded the same. When the Eras Tour movie was released, I made my father go see it with me, and he was a good sport about it. As is the minhag for Swifties, he dressed up with me. He wore a unicorn headband to match my pink sparkly outfit. We sat next to each other so I could monitor his reaction. When Taylor comes out of the stage floor for the first time, my father watched for a minute, turned to me and said, "No wonder she can't dance, she's too tall." However, at the end, he proclaimed himself a Swiftie and even said some of her errors sounded different from each other. And now Taylor and I have something in common. We both couldn't please my father 100%. I wrote an earlier version of this eulogy after Yom Kippur when we thought the end was near. When my family went to say goodbye to him in Sarasota a couple of weeks ago, he was mostly alert and able to connect with all of us, which was a tremendous bracha. After everyone else said their goodbyes, I sat with him alone and held his hand and said, "Daddy, this is probably the last time I will see you." He said, "I know." I said, "I love you and thank you." And he said, "Ahava, you brought so much fun into my life." It struck me that he recognized that this was a quality in our relationship that I wanted to highlight, that I knew made me special to him. It made me feel so good that with the complex relationship we had, he knew me, really knew me, and appreciated this aspect of my personality. One place my father did really appreciate fun was sports. As a kid, I would often join him while he watched games and would pepper him with questions. He was very patient with me and would answer the same questions over and over again, a job that Fryman and Navon now have. He was a popular basketball player in high school and college, as Amaya noted, and he was a coach to several high school teams when I was a kid. And that's really the crux of who my father was. At his heart, my father was a coach, someone who always wanted you to improve and be better. When I think about it, I always wanted to win with my father. Maybe it was his crazy ego and my crazy ego, or a combination of our craziness together. But I know at his essence, he was rooting for me, even if he didn't always word it artfully. And that's my message to his grandchildren and his great grandchildren, whom he loves so much and so uncomplicatedly. Ezra, Michal, Amichai, Oriel, Idan, Adva, Devora, Pinchas, Meirav, Natal, Natanel, Abigail, Lavi, Hallel, Ephrat, Avi, Tehila, Orly, Ari, Yoav, Sophia, Amaya, and Navon. Root for the people that you love. Cheer them on. Tell them they can do anything they want to do. I walk into every room confident and sure of myself because my father always told me I could do anything I wanted, be anyone I wanted to be, and achieve any dream I had. What a gift to give to a child, especially a girl. So for everyone in this room, do that for all of the people that you love. Root for them. And when you do, remember Usher and Arthur and Coach and Daddy and Ziggy. He's still rooting for you, and he always will be. Daddy, I love you. Thank you. I forgive you. I hope you forgive me too. And I promise you the next time I see you, I won't stick out my tongue.
So I had the privilege on Wednesday of being in Amarat Makpela. And so that's where we get the mitzvah pesach from. It says Torah and Rosh Hashanah Levo Avram stole the Sarah in Fosa. And Avram came to Uja Sarah and to call. So I'll try to do more of the pesach like the Quran. So forgive me if I get emotional. So the famous author, Umberto Eco, Italian, and he has this quote, which I think really sums up probably by some beds. I believe that what we become depends on what our fathers teach us at odd moments. They aren't trying to teach us, we are formed by little scraps of wisdom. So you know, when we grow up, we learn from our parents. I think that our parents are the standard, what should be done, what's normal. When we grow a little older, we learn that other people have different views when we get married. We see that everything that our parents taught us might be an alternative way of being done. And I think it's important, in reflecting on my father's life, to understand who his parents were and where he came from. And some of the previous speakers mentioned this, they said, so my father was born in 1942, which, was one of the darkest times in Jewish history, which when you say one of the dark times in Jewish history, there's a very, very long list. Okay, but 1942 was a terrible time. As we know, it was during the Holocaust. Parents were not Holocaust survivors. They had left their homes in Romania, Hungary earlier. But as previous speakers mentioned, they both lost a lot of relatives in the Holocaust. They both had their family who died, and many families older than them, and also even younger than them who died. So they had a lot of trauma, had survivor's guilt, and it really impacted upon my father in a lot of different ways. One thing that said by my father was that he wasn't conventional. He loved music, and the best music metaphor to describe it was that he marched to the beat of his own drama. But he really was studying contrasts, and it was always a surprise. For example, my father, earlier in his career, he represented photographers, the ad agency on Madison Avenue in New York, but he never had a camera. My whole life, I never saw him with a camera. I don't think he ever took a single picture of us. My mother did. I got actually a lot of these. My father, he didn't like cash machines. He would always get cash through the drive-in. And so he wasn't an adapter to that seemed like using technology, but on the other hand, he was the first person I know that had a fax machine and also a car phone. He adapted sometimes, and other times he didn't adapt. He wasn't. He was a disinterested student at school. He told me a story once that he was in junior high school, and math, and he said, I have to go up and write on the board sometimes, like maybe geometric proofs or something. And the teacher said, if anyone doesn't really want to be here, they don't have to be here. And my father heard that, and that was the last thing he heard from that teacher. Okay, but the contrast here is that my father was a very intelligent man, very well read. You had to cut through a lot of the layers of fluff that sometimes surround us. One story I'll tell is that when he was in college, so he went to yeshiva, and he was a big basketball star. I think he only went to school to play basketball. But anyway, so he was a senior in the poli-science major. He was a senior in the poli-science seminar, the club IPD. So the dean assigned a paper for the class. This is got senior year, and everyone handed him a paper. And the dean, in the next class or thereafter, he brought in the papers, and there were 16 people in the class. And he took the papers and he threw them across his desk, across them onto the floor. He said, 13 out of 16 of you are on the dean's list. He said, not a single one of you has any idea what I'm talking about. And he goes, and he further said, and there's only one of you in this class that knows how to write English, and you'll never guess who that is. So that was my father. I mean, he clearly he learned something. I mean, he wrote a book, and it was somewhat of a success. We actually sold the movie rights to TNT. They never made the movie, but maybe they will one day. Um, he loved music, but like I don't know that he knew anything about music technically. He never played an instrument. He I don't know where he got this information from or this talent from, but there's one song that he produced, and he told me he said, yeah, we didn't think the guitar would work here, so we put in a mandolin instead. And you could hear from the song that the mandolin made the song. I don't know why he knew that, where he knew that. I guess it was a God-given talent that he had. But that was just my father. He was very surprising. He seemed to not be involved in things, but just have incredible insight into them a lot. So I'd be remiss if I wouldn't talk about basketball when it comes to my father. As Maya mentioned, a very big part of his life, but that which defined him really, all my life. Well, maybe not all my life, but maybe for the first 30 to 40 years, people would say to me, "Oh, you're Arthur Aaron's son." Right? That was a great ball player. Um, and no one ever called Marty except people who knew him from basketball. Which I thought was interesting, but my father was actually a fantastic basketball player, and he was honorable mention All City when he was in high school. He played at YU. He was co-captain of the team. He was on the all-time scoring list. And it was a big part of who he was. I also played basketball, but as it is with sons and fathers and sons, sometimes, well, anyway, my father, I never was able to really play with or against my father when he was really good and I was good enough to play with him on his level. So by the time that I was old enough that I could actually play with him in a competitive way, he was already on the decline because basketball players don't make it past a certain time. At least in that time they didn't. Anyway, but of course he coached me, but back to what the quote I said about Humberto Eco. So I spent a lot of time with my father going to basketball practices. It started when I was like 7 or 8. I used to go with him to Torah High School. They didn't have a gym, so they played at SAR High School, which I'm sure it's not the same anymore. But they had a little tiny gym. I used to go with him. I was like 7 or 8 years old, and it wasn't their gym, so he used to have this like bag of basketballs, and I used to go with him in the car. And sometimes, interestingly, later on, a lot of the or Torah students were from Teaneck, so he would take them as well. So I would go with him there, and we would. I was young, so I wasn't really. I would just sit on the sideline and bounce the ball. He coached me in high school. We had a ton of memories about basketball. So I do remember a lot about my father's basketball coach. He coached many years. He coached at Mariah. He coached at like I said, Artora. He coached at Frisch for years. He coached for Torah Academy. We have a fond memory of going to the Maccabi games in Toronto and winning the bronze medal. We were the only team that wore yarmulkes, and it was a big thing. I mean, at the time I didn't really appreciate it, but this is the Maccabi games. It's huge from all over the United States, Canada, Israel, South America, some from Australia. And there we were, the Yeshiva League All-Stars basically, and we were able basically to win. We won 7 athlete games. And a lot of people came up to my father and said it's so fantastic that you did this, because our kids got to see that young men with yarmulkes could, they could play ball, and they were just, just as athletic as the rest of them. But my father, like coaching, really, as everyone said, was really a love of his. He really loved his players. He really, he definitely didn't do it for the money. And he really, when he would see his players outside, he would always ask about them, and he would always be very happy at their off course successes. And he really had a lot of love for them. I remember one story when I was in high school. So this is kind of a strange story, but one of the players, we were playing in actually the first game of the season. One of the players had glasses, and he stole the ball, and he went in for a layup. And as he was going for the layup, he took his glasses off in mid layup, and then he actually made the layup. And so anyway, after the game, I thought like, well, why don't you have contact lenses? I mean, this was 1986. Contact lenses been around a long time. So anyway, end of the story is I'll cut the chase. My father ended up, thanks to my mom's, getting him contact lenses, and he had contact lenses. And then that was how my father felt. Like it wasn't just about coaching and trying to win the basketball games, but he really thought he was a teacher. And as the mindset, it really was a teaching about life. And my father loved sports. And one of the reasons we love sports is because that's the one said it's like life that not so many areas in life can you just do your own thing, be yourself, and your success or failure depends on yourself. You like you said, you show up there in your short pants, and if you're good enough, then you're going to show it, and if you're not going to show it, and that's also okay. But if you want to do that, then you have to really you have to be the one to do it. You can't hide behind your family or stuff, where you got a degree from or anything like that. So he loves sports for that reason. As others said, I could tell a lot of stories about my father, like Striders. I really appreciate everyone coming. I would like to thank my mother for her care for my father. It's been a long time, care, but it's been the last few years, I guess, have been difficult, and it was very trying. Unfortunately, this is the way God created the world, that when we get older, it's not as easy physically and everything. So my mother was really there for him, and she deserves all the thanks in the world, and really great amount of appreciation, which I know my father had for her, although he didn't always express as much as he should have, because if he would have expressed as much as he could have, he would have requested all the time and never stopped. But such is the nature of this kind of thing. Anyway, so I know that my dad was here. You can tell me 4 things. You tell me, don't be sad. But I just want to go back to something. So my father once told me, going back to my father was crazy adamant about not showing any signs of Availus in the house. So if we ever want socks, my father would really, I mean, I'd say it would go ballistic, but it hadn't been invented back then. But he would be really upset, and even the craziest little things he would make a mention of. So, and I never understood why. I thought, whatever, like I said, you grow up to think your parents are normal, then you realize they have quirks like everyone else. The problem is that later you have those quirks. And you say, my God, I just sounded exactly like my father. But I think the reason that he had that, so I was, I spent the last, I don't know, I was traveling for Midwest, so I was on a long plane ride, and when before you're burying a relative, so you're not allowed to do anything, but you are allowed to say blood to the family. You're allowed to study laws of the Bailiff, so I spent a lot of time on the plane reading the laws of the Bailiff, and so I think that one of the reasons that he had this sort of that adamancy about that was that his parent, a lot of the laws of the Bailiffs are pretty straightforward, but then there's all kinds of situations where Like, for example, you don't, when do you tear Kriya? So you tear Kriya, usually the halacha is when the grave is finished, the filled grave. But then so I read that, and then there's pages and pages about what happens if you find out that someone died a year ago, what happens if you find out you tore Kriya and the person ends up being alive, and all these other things. And none of these are important, but none of these are relevant to me, thank God. But I think they were all relevant to his parents and their generation. I think they all lived through this time where Abelis was, they had to read the whole book basically. But thank God I have to read the normal, somebody dies and Onain, Abelis, what you can do, what you can't do. But they had to know it all. They had to know what and the responses are full of questions like this. So I think that's why that was. And so I think that's an insight into my father, which I didn't appreciate till today or yesterday. Anyway, so back to what I was gonna say to finish. And that was another thing. So my father once told me, it was all about contact. If someone who wouldn't let you wear socks in the house, what he would say to me was strange, and I remember it. So he said to me once, listen, he said, when I die, I don't want anyone to make any speech. I should have told you this before. But I wasn't. So what I want them to do is I want them to take the music that I played, and I want them to play that. And I want people to see this is what I gave to the world. It's beautiful music. And that was my contribution. Anyway, he said that, but he wasn't really serious about that. But he was making a point about his love for music and we had achieved something that was really it's timeless when he played something like music or art. It's a timeless thing. Anyway, so back to what I wanted to say. Conclude. So my father, if he were here, he would say 4 things. He would say to me and everyone else, or maybe just me. He would say, "Don't be sad." Said we had a good run. 55 years. Had a good run. Hang in there. And I love you. So I want to say to my dad, I'll try not to be sad, but that's not gonna work. We did have a good run, 55 years. Maybe I'll try to hang in there, and I love you.
I want to conclude, the hour is late, but we'll just conclude with Mikel Malirachman. Before doing so, I just want to say that his Jewish name is Osher Ben Yaakov Yehuda. And it's brought down in the Mefarshim that at the end of Shemona Esrei, at the end of davening,